Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Throne of Steel episode number 158 based on novel. So let's start. The remaining half of the domain instantly weakened, and one could clearly see that Dark Mage retired to the remaining half of the domain. His staff-grasping right hand was completely smashed to pieces and purified by the grey radiance. But at the same time, the light warrior from the other side moved. In a glow of bright light, the heavy sword grasped in both his hands was brandished over his head. An intense sunshine seemed to become one with him as his gold-red figure flashed like lightning in the midst of frantic accelerations. This attack seemed able to split the earth, just like the unsurpassable sunfire. Caia shifted her stance, flinging her now ash-grey-colored hair back, scattering it away. Just like a grey waterfall, it traced an arc, whirling at slow speed. The grey diamond-shaped crystal on her forehead disappeared, but an incomparably strong and vigorous grey radiance emerged from her chest. All the surroundings suddenly slowed down. Caia was moving slowly, but that light warrior who was originally dashing at a light speed also slowed down. The movements of the two became very distinct. In this process of slowdown, a transparent grey entity emerged from Kia's body that was similar to Kia, but illusory and transparent looking. Her hands kept forming seals in front of her chest, and the grey figure flashed, marking extremely complex runes onto Kia's back. Fifth of the 7 arts of the god of death, Death's silent annihilation. In the process of slowdown, the next instant after those grey runes were marked into her back, the sickle of the god of death turned into 7 other weapons of the same shape, the first being the slowest while every next one was a bit faster, with each one following each other. At the time the sickle swept at the already seriously wounded Darkness Mage, the 7 sickles made one, and a translucent ash-grey blade projection was shot at the Darkness Mage, before flying toward the rushing Light Mage. That blade projection was extremely bizarre. Its main part was like a substantial crystal of a grey color, but all around the blade converged circles of intense white light which revolved all around it. It did not emit killing intent nor death energy, but gave off, just at the sight of it, a choking feeling. The instant that blade projection flew off, space and time returned to normal, all speeds reinstated to their original state right before the sword of that light mage clashed against that annihilating projectile. The Darkness Mage under Kia's feet directly disappeared into a grey fog, and his powerhouse's soul integrated with the eternal melody in a black flash. An ear-piercing sound of friction came from a white smoke. It was a thrust of intensity comparable to a red-heated piece of iron clashing against a piece of ice. In that quick impact, all the domain power of the Light Warrior was gathered at once to block, his whole body stagnating in the sky. The intense golden-red radiance emanating from his body was shrouded in the midst of a drizzling white halation, clashing against the light essence dispersed from his body. That white light was the annihilating light of purification attached to the 5th of the 7 arts of the god of death, able to purify any elemental essence. Even an elemental attack of much stronger properties would get substantially consumed and purified. Although the light warrior was making use of the light attribute, he was, after all, an undead creature born from a soul of a powerhouse, making the light of purification his bane. In addition, even with the support of his domain's power, his originally quite wounded state made it very hard for him to rush out from the eroding light of purification. Kia! The whole group cried out unknowingly in alarm. Kia had already had to use 5 of the 7 arts of the god of death since the beginning of the fight, but she still showed no signs of stopping. A grey path extended underneath her, over the midst of which she stayed afloat. On the surface, the current Kia looked no different than normal, as if none of that had affected her. But everyone could clearly see that when the 7 arts of the god of death reached such a level, the backlash inflicted on her could only be equally fearful. As the light warrior managed to expel most of the corroding effects of the annihilating purification, the grey path had extended underneath him. The next instant, Kia moved, just like a grey butterfly throwing itself at that light warrior who had holy fire ascending over his body. The current Kia was in an extraordinary state of mind. The sickle of the god of death launched an attack at astonishing speed, as a translucent blade projection shone upon him, the soul fire in the eyes of the light warrior pulsed in extreme terror. First of the 7 arts of death, death in childhood. Second art, cleansing death. Third art, death's scream. Fourth art, death god's kiss. Fifth art, death's silent annihilation. The 5 consecutive supreme arts that were launched in a spurt united as one, unleashing the inevitable might of the death god, a journey in the incomparable land of death. And that was the 6th art of the god of death, death in journey. The unity of the 5 arts formed this 6th absolute force. The first art, Death in Childhood, forced the light warrior to using his heavy sword to barely resist with his all, but the second art filled his swords with cracks, his whole body once again shrouded in light of purification. Then Death's scream locked his body in a stiff state, before Death God's kiss and Death in silent annihilation flashed in turn. Kia appeared right behind the light warrior. Flashes of grey and white colors slowly dispersed, and a faint halation flashed through. Kia stood there silently, her hands holding the handle of the sickle of the god of death. She looked extremely calm as the ash-grey radiance on her body dispersed at an astonishing speed. But from her straight posture, she was not in any state of weakness. The frozen light instantly turned into fine powder, before a golden radiance traced an arc to arrive in front of Kia and enter into the eternal melody hanging on her chest. Success! She had just succeeded, relying on the power of 6 of the 7 arts of the god of death, in crushing 2 holy guards of the 9th step able to unite their domain. In front of the death god, the great might of light and darkness withered away in purification. The saint daughter of Samsara Kia had just succeeded, she had to use all she had, but she managed to break through the 6th floor of this tower of eternity. At the very moment, she seemed to be in a far lighter state than her previously desperately wounded comrades, but the deeply wounded Chen Yinga and Wang Yuanyuan were the ones unable to refrain from their overflowing tears. They didn't know about the backlash that Kia had to sustain after using these 6 arts of the god of death, and all were afraid that this backlash would last for a very long duration. Kia was standing calmly, but the next instant, her body suddenly shivered. Deep halations dispersed from her chest. First was a red, then a blue, a green, a yellow, a black, and finally golden halations circling back and forth and flickering around each other, causing Kia's fair figure to let out a dazzling light. As this multicolored radiance flickered, the whole Tower of Eternity lit up, and this multicolored light shone in the midst of the Tower of Eternity. That was a dazzling lighting, giving off an indescribable feeling of brightness. This whole radiance came out from the eternal melody hanging on Kia's chest. Her body kept shivering lightly, and the next instant, the multicolored radiance on Kia's body shone even more remarkably. Making use of the 6 arts of the god of death already drew out her whole power. If not for the fusion process the spiritual stove of Samsara had undergone, she would be nothing more than a walking corpse right now. The first art of death in childhood didn't cause any backlash, but starting from the 5th, the backlash would affect her whole body. The disappearance of the senses in all one's body will result in death. And right now, Kia had only her 6th sense left, perception. Her vision, hearing, taste, smell and touch had already disappeared, leaving her left with only her perception. This instant, she was already incomparably weakened, to the extent that she was not even able to raise a finger, as she made the astonishing discovery of a mystical force surging out from her body, causing a massive amount of surrounding energy to gather onto her body. A feeling of warmth spread through her whole body, causing her incomparable feeling of weakness to disappear swiftly, as the spiritual energy in her body was replenished at an astonishing speed. Which was to say that this force was on the same level as the post-fusion spiritual stove of Samsara. In fact, this was the force belonging to the Tower of Eternity, belonging to the holy necromancer, slumbering calamity Elux. The multicolored halation gained in intensity with Kia in its midst, causing her darkened skin to recover its original gloss. To her shock, Kia found out that her lost senses were unexpectedly recovering. She was not the only one experiencing this kind of feeling. Although the center of this multicolored light was her other comrades were directly exposed to that light, including Long Haochen lying on the ground who was also cleansed by this multicolored light. The other heavily wounded teammates recovered at an astonishing speed from their injuries, the same going even for Zhong Fangfang and Wang Yuanyuan's lost vital force. This light was really beyond miraculous, no known healing forbidden spell could compare with that elemental force of incomparable purity. This instant, everyone could sense the elemental gods of fire, water, wind, earth, light, and darkness descending and joining their forces to heal the whole group's injuries. Caia gradually felt flashes of understanding filling her. Right, all the tests they had to bear were so challenging, and they could only rely on their own power to pass through. The eternal melody didn't give them any kind of help, and some of them were narrowly killed during the trials. But this was in the end a trial, not a battle to death. No matter what kind of a cruel person the holy necromancer Elux could be, he had left this place for the sake of choosing a successor to inherit his great strength, and not to cause destruction. So, after everyone passed through this 6th trial, everything seemed to be over, which is why the Tower of Eternity caused this powerful 6 elemental recovering light to descend, helping them to recover from their wounds and replenishing them in energy. Elux wouldn't want a completely bruised disciple, let alone one wounded beyond recovery. The first ones to recover were Lin Xin, and Yu, Yang Wenjiao and Du and Yi, who had left all their spiritual energy to Kia and even had some damage in their channels due to that. But it took them under 10 minutes to recover fully, with a capacity of spiritual energy even above their original peak. This was due to the development of their capabilities through incessant battles. The next one was Chen Yinga, whose face gradually regained red tints. Managing to get up under Yang Wenjiao's assistance, she felt her depleted strength coming back slowly, and half an hour later, she had the pleasant surprise to find out about her total recovery. How bizarre, right after recovering entirely, that multicolored radiance started to avoid her and stop integrating. This instant, the different degrees of the other's wounds were visible. Sima Xian, Wang Yuan, and Zhong Fangfang were already soaked in the light for no less than 1 hour, and it was about the same for the distant Kia. And that multicolored light was maintained as if it had no limits. After another hour passed, Zhong Fangfang and Wang Yuan opened their eyes simultaneously, filled with great joy as their vital forces were already recovered fully. It was not that Wang Yuan's injuries were not as severe as Sima Xian. In reality, she had already sacrificed her life at that time, and was originally supposed to be dead, but Zhong Fangfang was there to share that backlash of hers, as well as offering a half of his vital force to her. Sima Xian's recovery took close to 4 hours to complete. As he groped his bald head while standing up, everyone couldn't help but cheer for him. That was the feeling of being done with the hard times. Their struggles and sacrifices were being paid back, and the more severe their wounds were, the more they gained from the Tower of Eternity's trials. For instance, Sima Xian's internal spiritual had directly soared to the 8th rank of the 7th step, nearing closely the 8th step. The same went for Wang Yuan and Zhong Fangfang, but because they had originally higher levels of cultivation, their upgrade was not as great as Sima Xian. The others were also boosted more or less greatly. Their cheers didn't last for long before coming to normal, because that multicolored light did not disappear after their recovery. The light was still there, seemingly gathered only on those two, Long Haochen and Kia. What a strange thing to behold, Long Haochen was clearly already dead, yet that multicolored light kept rushing forth inside his body. And the same went for Kia. The two of them had become the cause of this multicolored halation. Will Boss resurrect like that? Lin Xin raised the question with traces of hope. Han Yu silently shook his head, not likely. After all, Boss is already dead. See, the wound on his chest doesn't show any traces of recovery. The demon god emperor's strength is just that terrifying, that injury is impossible to treat, to say nothing about resurrecting him. It looks like we will have to head for the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity. But where is the 7th floor? Kia has already passed through the 6th floor, but how come there is no pathway for the 7th floor showing up? Chen Yinga asked in incomprehension. Zhong Fangfang responded, for now, we can only wait. Maybe it will come out by itself after this multicolored light terminates. Wang Yuan remarked with some worries, hopefully they can make it fast. Boss could only last for 7 days, and that's without including the time needed to resurrect him. We have already used up 2 days, so we have only 5 days left. Sima Xian remarked, that's already pretty good. We have 5 days left, they can't possibly keep absorbing this light for such a long time. Time passed, minutes after minutes. 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours. 12 hours. When no less than 12 hours had passed, the group started to get anxious. How much longer would this last? But right because of this, they couldn't help but secretly admire Kia. After each of them recovered fully, the assimilation of the multicolored light stopped immediately. The already deceased Long Haochen aside, Kia certainly made it back alive after this battle, yet this multicolored light soaked her for a whole 12 hours, which was not even enough for her to recover entirely. From this one could see the terror of the backlash from the 7 arts of the god of death. As everyone started to grow more and more worried, the multicolored light in the sky suddenly dimmed down, vanishing slowly. Kia opened both her eyes as this multicolored radiance disappeared from sight. Kia! Everyone immediately rushed to her in excitement. Sima took Long Haochen's corpse in his arms before running to join Kia's side. Chen Yinga grabbed Kia's arm, attentively watching her face. How are you, Kia? So the backlash of your 7 arts of the god of death was... Kia showed a faint smile. I didn't expect my backlash to actually disappear. It seemed to get counteracted by the ability of this Tower of Eternity. That's great. Chen Yinga immediately shouted in joy. They all knew that upon reaching the 6th of the 7 arts of the god of death, Kia's backlash would very possibly persist for several years, and some part of her may not ever recover again. As everyone was soaked in joy, Kia's chest suddenly lit up. This phenomenon was not the same as the previous multicolored radiance. Through Kia's clothes, the skull-shaped pendant started to make noises. The necklace binding it disappeared in the midst of a brilliant light. That golden skull slowly floated above Kia's head, its small eyes suddenly lighting up. Two tiny but extremely brilliant golden flames pulsed up. Suddenly, the two lights inside its eyes shot like two needles toward the end of the 6th floor. Everywhere the golden light passed, the originally hazy-looking 6th floor was lit up, and at its end, another sculpture of Elux came into view. This sculpture was entirely gold-colored, with only the heart spot-colored black. From the point of view of the group, a black flame seemed to ascend above it. A brilliant body, even with a dead heart soaked in darkness. Maybe this was the truest portrayal of the slumbering calamity Elux. Compared to the sculpture of the 5th floor, this one faintly gave out a much sadder feel. The rays shot from the eyes of the golden skull coming from the eternal melody entered into the eyes of this sculpture of the slumbering calamity, and immediately an intense golden flame ignited in result, as the whole 6th floor was set aflame. From the outside, a pillar seemed to form from these intense golden flames. The death energy that Kia had originally cleansed there abruptly became rich, and in the midst of the intense death energy appeared countless departed spirits filled with negative feelings. In such an environment, an incomparably rich light energy arose. This instant, the concentration of light essence in this 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity even exceeded that of the divine snail shield of sun and moon at the time they had found it in the swamps of gloom. Only, although the light essence was massive and rich, it was filled with bits of malevolence, completely unlike the peaceful feelings the divine snail shield originally used to let out. The pairs of massive pillars set to fire, the whole 6th floor became entirely illuminated. An intense golden halation spread out in the sky, and that light energy kept growing in intensity, giving off to Kia's group the feeling of getting soaked in a lake of light essence. Counting Simon's yarn, a total of 5 light users were present. But they didn't dare absorb the slightest bit of this rich light essence. This light essence permeated inside an extensive energy of death, giving them unawares strong feelings of rejection. Only Kia preserved a natural expression. As the one chosen by the god of death, any spectral and death energy around her body would only need a moment before dispersing. An aged voice suddenly sounded out from all 4 directions. That was a kind of soul transmission that Kia would be able to hear even after losing all her 6 senses. Welcome to the 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity. The fact you made it here proves that you are strong enough to succeed to me. Step on these last stairs, I will be waiting for you on the 7th floor. You only have to meet me face to face and I will make you my disciple. Otherwise, there will be no connection between the two of us. The aged voice did not carry any emotional vibes. If Long Haochen was still alive, he would definitely be able to tell everyone that this voice was exactly the same as the one he had heard the first time he stepped into the Tower of Eternity. The only difference was that it was not as cordial back then, and sounded extremely cold instead. The holy necromancer only left these few simple words before his voice disappeared. The sculpture at the end of the 6th floor suddenly made a movement, slowly moving its right arm, which brandished a staff pointed toward the dome on the top of the floor. The next instant, the whole 6th floor shone in a golden color. The group was only able to see that golden gloss in their lines of sight, and all couldn't help but shut their eyes because of its dazzling aspect. The liquid feeling light essence became solid at once that instant, making them unable to move in the slightest. This intense light did not last for too long, and when it vanished, everyone could see that the whole 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity was already completely different. The surroundings were pitch black, and a night sky formed the surroundings. An infinity of resplendent starlights glinted all around. Right now, although they had a firm feeling as when walking on the ground, they looked just like they were walking in the midst of a night sky, staying afloat. Under the illumination of the stars, this first experience filled them with a bizarre feeling. Not far in front of them had appeared a 10-meter-tall golden gate formed of 2 doors, shut tight right now. This sliding gate did not have any gorgeous decorations or ornaments, it was only filled with a deep golden color. They couldn't see what was behind, but what that golden sliding gate dispersed was an abundant death energy. A golden light swept past Kia's head. She unconsciously lifted up her hand to catch it, impressively, that was the eternal melody. However, right now it wasn't just a simple skull anymore. From the tip of the skull extended a metallic key. A bizarre feeling filled Kia's head, faintly realizing that everything she had experienced was actually a preparation for opening this gate. Every victory against a holy guard not only got her his approval and assistance, but also poured the power of its soul of a powerhouse inside the eternal melody. When the 12 holy guards are all absorbed inside the eternal melody, the ignition of the whole 6th floor of the Tower of Eternity was intended by the slumbering calamity. That would cause this golden gate to appear, its key being the eternal melody. What is the right path to take? Kia didn't know, but right now, she already had no way out. Turning back, Kia looked at the others, nibbling her lower lip. I will resurrect Long Houchen no matter what. No matter what? Everyone repeated loudly. Wang Yuanyuan took Long Houchen from Sima Xian's hand, and attached him onto Kia's back tightly using the chains. As the eternal melody in Kia's hand approached that golden gate closely, everyone couldn't help but feel tense, even more than during all the previous trials. For the sake of reaching this objective, they had spared no efforts, and that objective was right in front of their eyes. Just like after returning home a long time later, this made them instead even more nervous. Regardless of whether they would be able to resurrect Long Houchen with this move, they had only one final chance. After sparing no cost to arrive there at the risk of their lives, the matter of whether they could succeed was really too important. Kia didn't have any perplexed or apprehensive feelings anymore in her eyes, only determination and devotion. Her only thought was to resurrect Long Houchen. If that couldn't be done, then she could only accompany him in the other side where they would set up their own home. At the moment, Kia couldn't attend to humanity's situation, she only had Long Houchen in her heart. What use would there be to keep living if her beloved person stayed deceased? He was her whole world. The instant he died, her world just collapsed. The Golden Gate was heavy and full of awe. When Kia arrived in front of it, the eternal melody key in her hand dispersed a scorching heat. Lifting her hand, Kia put that key in, and it disappeared in this Golden Gate. Immediately, a rippling golden halation spread out from this gate of light, and the surrounding night sky flickered in golden light. Without the slightest sound, the two doors opened slowly. The whole bright glimmer of Hope's group controlled their breaths as they took a look. Right now, they felt incomparably nervous. The matter of whether Long Houchen could make it out alive would depend on this moment. Their view gathered onto the opening gate. Just what was behind? They saw very rapidly. The final road was right before them. More accurately, that was a golden flight of steps which elevated in the midst of the illumination of the night sky, leading even higher in the night sky. These stairs were placed at a slope of 45 degrees, with this steep slope and an even step height all the way upwards to where bright flashes of light emanated. This was an aerial passage, extending high in the sky. But this passage seemed to have no end in sight. Kowtow after each step on the aerial passage. A majestic voice was transmitted from the bright gate of light to each person's ear. So we actually have to kowtow at each step? They were all alarmed, but Kia still showed no hesitations and immediately stepped through the gate and kneeled on the first step. No matter how arrogant, she had to set that trait aside for the sake of her loved one. As long as Long Houchen would be saved, Kia believed anything to be worth it. The rest of the group unwittingly went through the gate of light, but although open, it had a massive resistance. That force rejected them all, and only Kia and Long Houchen on her back were able to go through. After kneeling once, Kia took a higher step, then kneeled once again, paying her respects. Long Houchen on her back swayed only lightly in the process. Lin Xin asked Sima Xian hesitantly, "Is this path going to be highly oppressive?" Sima Xian nodded and replied, "Very possibly. This should also be a kind of trial." At this point, he suddenly became alarmed and murmured, "We have already vanquished the 12 holy guards and passed the 6 floors trials. This path can't be a trial for making it to the 7th floor, right?" Hearing him, the whole group's expressions looked different. They had all already seen personally how hard the trial on the 6th floor was. If there was another trial even in this 7th floor, everyone was afraid that even Kia wouldn't be able to bear it. Wang Yuanyuan responded in a grave tone, "There should not be a trial of strength, right? The trials we have already passed were already hard enough. If there's yet another even harder trial, what need would there be to even fight for Elux's inheritance? I think that even if this turns out to be a trial, it should be for evaluating other aspects than sheer cultivation strength." They were taking successive guesses, but the only one to really know would be Kia. This path to the sky had no end in sight and wasn't comprised with any oppressive existence, with nothing there to pressure her or stop her advance. But, at the first step she took after passing through the gate, all the internal and external spiritual energy in her vanished. She had absolutely no idea of which miracle could make all traces of her cultivation vanish. At the very moment, she was not the saint daughter of Samsara anymore, but just an all the more ordinary girl, with at most a better overall body condition than her peers. Long Houchen was neither overweight nor underweight, making Kia have no feeling of weight at the time her cultivation was still present. But the current Kia had neither her internal nor external spiritual energy, so Long Houchen on her back felt heavy. Stepping and kowtowing in succession, Kia already started to get slower after climbing for just 10 or so stairs. Sweat had already started to form on her forehead, and her legs and waist already felt numb. Kia knew that if she couldn't inherit from Elux, all their previous efforts will come to naught. But with Long Houchen on her back, and without backing from her spiritual energy, how could she even go far? Another person would perhaps already be starting to think about pros and cons, or perhaps even give up, but Kia only had determination in her. The path to the sky beyond was getting harder and harder, but she didn't flinch, only filled with one thought, that she would either bring Long Houchen to the 7th floor of the Tower of Eternity, or die in the attempt. With such a resolve, she did not have the slightest negative feeling, and these difficult times instead made her even more stubborn. With one stare and one kneel, Kia did not turn back even once. There was nothing else but the stairs going upwards in her eyes. Her footsteps were extremely steady. One step, one kneel, get up. And so on, and so forth, over and over again. When Kia reached her 20th stair, everyone standing on the other side of the gate could already see her pained look. Is this path to the sky really pressuring? Otherwise, how could she already start to get slower so rapidly at her level of cultivation? But if that was really pressuring, she should be resisting thanks to using her spiritual energy. Yet there was not the slightest spiritual energy flowing out from her body. They had stopped talking, as a talk would never be as tangible as truth. Kia was already working on passing that path to the sky, advancing without pause. Kia, you can do it. Wang Yuan clenched her fists. All they could do was to cheer for Kia now, and support her with their feelings. When Kia was at the 30th stair, her whole body was aching terribly, especially her knees, which felt as if myriads of needles had pierced through them. Sweat was already drenching over all her body. After bowing down for 30 times, half her body was already drenched in sweat. If she wasn't carrying Long Houchen on her back, she would have at least gone through 200 stairs before this situation would have arisen. She would even be able to move faster and more unrestrainedly. And now, Kia had on her back a Long Houchen weighing over 80 kilograms. And at the same time, her weight didn't reach 100 kilograms. This burden was really too heavy for her body. But Kia didn't stop. In the end, the pain of her body was unable to affect her heart in the slightest. She took firm steps in the process of advancing and kowtowing. 35, 36, 37, 42, 43, 44. Look everyone, what's that? Chen Yinga suddenly called out. Everyone followed her pointed finger, to see that at some point those sparkling pure gold stairs had gained 2 tints of faint red color. This was a mild red that one wouldn't discover without paying great attention. There's more. Chen Yinga called out once again, and as Kia once again took another step, 2 thin red traces had flowed from one stair higher. Han Yu clenched his fists. Even despite his strong character, his voice was unexpectedly shaky. Kia is wounded in the knee. Right, those thin red traces were blood, Kia's blood. After over 40 steps, burdened by the 80 kilograms weighing Long Houchen, her long skirt was already torn, which is how her blood could be left on the step. Everyone couldn't help but worry for Kia. Although they didn't know why Kia would let herself bear such a pain, right now, it was really obvious to see that this path was abnormal. Although this path stripped all her spiritual energy, that was not enough to bend her willpower. Due to the pain she had to sustain since she was young, Kia's willpower had become extraordinary. Moreover, her goal now was nothing else but to resurrect her man. One step after another, each step a kowtow. Blood drops kept falling 2 by 2, and at the time she reached the 57th stair, her pair of blood drops turned into 3, that third one coming from Kia's forehead. Kia was already in Yang Wenzhou's arms, and didn't dare look anymore, lost in tears. The others also unconsciously shut their eyes. Their bodies and minds were shaken violently. Kia was really too strong. Kia didn't take any pause, seemingly feeling no pain at all. 50 stairs, 60 stairs, 70 stairs, 80 stairs. Those stairs were painful, and she had to staggeringly go on. Her body was already close to collapse, and the blood trails left on the ground started to form a puddle at the bottom of the stairs. But she still kept going on, climbing without rest. A deep force of incomparable scale seemed to be supporting her gradually weakening body. Bam, on the 112th stair, Kia suddenly fell down, violently smashing the stairs on the ground. But her right arm still grasped the bottom of the stairs, so that she wouldn't slip down. Blood covered the whole hem of her skirt, and as her tiptoes slided along the way, Kia's face of originally extreme beauty had already become full of blood. Because her body was far too burdened, it was shaking violently. Only her eyes and look remained firm, resolute. With a violent gasp for breath, she barely managed to shift position to another stair, and kowtow once again in her _bang. But this time, she did not climb further. Her line of sight turning dark, she directly fell unconscious. Kia, outside the gate of light, the rest of the group was clearly seen shouting loudly. Wang Yuan even had no qualms to ram her whole body against that screen, only to be shot back directly. To say nothing of Chen Yinga, even Sima Xian, Lin Xin, and Han Yu, the oldest of the group, already couldn't bear to watch. The traces of blood flowing down at each of Kia's movements felt like sharp swords piercing through their hearts every time. But there was still nothing they could do. Unable to enter through that gate, they were naturally unable to be of any help to Kia. They could only stare blankly at the sight of her blood flowing through those golden stairs. There was no chance at all on the path to the sky. The golden stairs still had no ending. An hour passed. Kia's body suddenly shook lightly. Using her arms to prop herself up, she slowly rose up. She had just awoken. Not turning back, she just paused slightly before struggling to barely manage to get up. Once again stepping up, she kowtowed once again. In just a moment, her blood had covered a whole new stair. Kia! Chen Yinga and Wang Yuan already had tears dripping all over their faces, and their voices had already turned hoarse due to the crying. Each and every man had their eyes reddened, clenching their fists to the extent of having their fingernails pierced through their skins. They were just so hopeful to be able to take Kia's stead to climb through this path to the sky. 1 stair, 2 stairs, 3 stairs, 4 stairs. The awakened Kia was still that strong. On her back, Long Haochen's corpse already felt as heavy as a mountain. That was how heavy he weighed on her heart. Without a break, she kept advancing through that path. It's either die in this path, or bring him back to life. These words were repeated without pause in Kia's mind. This time, she managed to advance through 28 stairs, before once again collapsing and falling unconscious. But, even so, she took grasp of the next stair in front of her eyes unbendably, so that she wouldn't slide down. Climb and fall unconscious, and so on. Kia collapsed time after time, and climbed many again and again. When she had made it onto the 200th stair, she was already entirely covered in blood. This was already her 7th time falling unconscious on the path to the sky. Chen Yinga had already passed out in the midst of crying, while the others attacked relentlessly that gate blocking their way. Only that way could they vent the pain and torment inside them. Kia's knees were already devoid of the slightest skin and flesh, her deep white bones already coming to sight. She was unaware that her fair white bone contorted all the time, and because of the excessive blood loss, her whole body was morbidly pale. Her life was running off at an astonishing speed, yet no end of the path to the sky came to sight. This time, Kia fell unconscious for an especially long time. A whole 7 hours had passed before she awoke. Kia! Kia! The whole bright glimmer of hope group was frantically venting on the separating area in front of them, already all shouting hoarsely. They really couldn't bear to watch anymore, and really wanted to tell her to stop already. The stairs between the 6th and 7th floor were tormenting them far more than all the previous trials. But Kia didn't look back from beginning to end, slightly lifting up her head only to see a large swath of blood color in front of her eyes. Barely moving her body, she found out that she was already unable to stand up anymore. Falling unconscious 7 times already had drained all her physical force, and her life was already close to an end. Right at this time, a flash of light came in front, and a massive gate of light appeared on the 10th floor in front of her, flashing slowly. As the gate of light opened up slowly, it faintly revealed a golden world concealed behind. A gate? A gate? Kia's somewhat ash-grey eyes suddenly lit up at the sight of this gate. Hope had come out in front of her. The rest of bright glimmer of hope could also see what she saw. They unconsciously became silent, looking at that even larger gate while biting their teeth tightly and painfully. Kia's legs were already totally numb, but this instant her eyes lit up incomparably. Carrying Long Houchen, she did her utmost to pull herself and Long Houchen to the next stair using her arms, her forehead leaning on the next stair with force. Deep traces of blood being left on the stair, this golden path to the sky even started to gain a thin red tinge due to the blood left by her. But Kia didn't care about that. The gate in front of her eyes was her hope. I must bring Houchen through this gate of light so that he can resurrect. Kia didn't know why, but she faintly came to hear an extremely emotional teary voice resound through her ears, crying in extreme suffering. But this did not matter to her. How could she attend to reflect on other matters than to keep going forward? The hidden capabilities in her body were aroused by this hope, and she managed to climb through a stair after another by the use of her 2 arms. Crawling up stair by stair, she would cover at least a third of its surface with the blood on her body every time, but this blood became more and more light in color every time. Wouldn't her blood run out at this rate? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Finally, when the gate of light became very near, Kia's firm and resolved expression finally displayed a faint smile. Raising her hand and her fingers, already ground to the extent that its bones were coming to sight, she shiveringly grabbed that gate of light. But this time, a sickening scene came to all bright glimmer of hope's sight. That gate of light suddenly swayed lightly, raising 1 step higher and causing Kia to catch emptiness. Despair filled up the eyes of everyone present outside the first gate. Was the gate on top of the stairs actually a fake? They became mad to the extent of pounding the gate in front of them with all their strength. They all cursed the holy necromancer, slumbering calamity Elux. Kia was just a girl, why must he be so cruel? Only Kia didn't fall to despair, still as determined looking. Her emptiness-catching hand fell onto the previous stair on emptiness, and her body shifted up once again. This was her final chance. She knew that if she were to fall unconscious once again, she would perhaps never awake again, so there was no other chance to resurrect Long Houchen. Conviction and resolve burned fiercely inside of her. Kia's arms suddenly exerted all their strength to make a frantic rise to the next stair. This video will end here.